Hi, I'm Roger Himes, the Bible storyteller and minstrel, also known as the Gospel Coach. Today's story is about feeding the 5,000. He fed the hungry multitude. Yes, he fed the hungry multitude with a little bit of fish and bread. Everyone was fed. He fed the hungry multitude. Yes, he did. He fed the hungry multitude. He fed the hungry multitude with a little bit of fish and bread. Everyone was fed. He fed the hungry multitude. You know, feeding the 5,000 is the only miracle in all four Gospels, so we should give it special attention. Jesus always had so much compassion for people. He cared about everybody. In this day, there were so many people involved. 5,000 men, if they each had a wife and 2 kids, that's 20,000 people. Now, Jesus traveled light. He didn't have a picnic basket or a backpack full of food. And even if he did, how much good would it do? He had to make it manageable, so he sat the people down in groups of 50. Now, I don't know about you, but 50 is a pretty good number of people. Now, Jesus turned to Philip and he asked where they were going to get all the bread they needed to feed all these people. Now, we're told that Jesus knew what he was going to do. He was actually just testing Philip to see how he'd respond and what he'd say. Now, it was a perplexing situation, and if I'd been Philip, I think I would have just said, Lord, I don't have a clue what you're going to do, but I'm sure you do, so I'll just watch and do what you say. It was Andrew, who was Peter's brother, who at least had the nerve to say, Jesus is a little boy here with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish in his lunch. Would this help? Now, I'm not sure if Andrew was being sarcastic or serious. We're going to look at Andrew next time and get a feel for him and maybe get more insight into him. Now, Jesus took the 5 loaves and 2 fish and he blessed them and he broke them and he gave them to the disciples to pass out to the people. Now, keep in mind, this was only a small boy's lunch. They weren't huge wonder loaves of bread or 20-pound fish. Now, even that would have done much good for between 5 and 20,000 people. But let's think about Peter for a minute. He was kind of the leader of the people, the one the other guys looked up to. And he only had a small piece of bread in his hand and a small piece of fish. Remember, those 5 loaves and there were 12 disciples, so he didn't have very doggone much. Now Jesus says, okay, Peter, begin with that first group of 50 over there in front of you. I'm sure Peter looked at the first group of 50 and he says, you've got to be kidding me, Lord. I don't want to be sarcastic or be sacrilegious, but you had to be thinking this way, Jesus, have you spent too much time out in the sun today? This isn't going to work. He had to be thinking that way because these guys were not seasoned disciples. They were new recruits. They were still wet behind the ears. And I'm sure Peter almost defiantly thought, okay, I'll play this game for a minute. Maybe Jesus will come to his senses. I'll look like a fool, but that's okay. Whatever you say, Jesus, I do it. And then he probably recalled, he says, I remember what your mother said in Canaan, when you turned the water into wine. She said to the servants there, to them, do whatever he tells you to do. So I'll follow that advice. I'll be obedient. And he walks over to the first group of 50 people and he tears off a small piece of bread and hands it to the first man, and then a small piece to the second man, then a small piece to the third man, and then a small piece to the 5th man, and then the 10th person, then the 20th person. But the bread he has in his hand doesn't decrease in size. It stays the same amount. Now he's perplexed. How can this be? So he starts tearing off big pieces of bread, now trying to get rid of it. The disciples received a lot more today than the people did. When they finished, they had more bread and fish left over than they started with. And they fed between 5 and 20,000 people. Now, it didn't make sense. It couldn't be. But Jesus wants us to learn from this example. He doesn't always want us to, take check of things and check our resources and our abilities and our bank accounts or our wallets to see how much money we have. He just wants us to listen to him and to simply do what he says to do without trying to figure it all out in advance. He fed the hungry multitude. Yes, he fed the hungry multitude with a little bit of fish and bread. Everyone was fed. He fed the hungry multitude. Hey, I'm Roger Himes, the Bible storyteller and minstrel, and I want to thank you a lot for listening.